In our morning round, stress and your health. A new survey this morning finds that teenagers are more stressed out than adults, if you can believe that. 27% of teens say they are extremely stressed during the school year, and that's compared to only 21% of grown-ups. The bad news here, teen stress tends to stick around through adulthood.
Probably be pretty busy.
Why are we so stressed out? This is the question that my partner and I hope to explore while creating this film. We both know how stressful being a student can be for our generation. There is a certain pressure that is always present in our minds, that a life full of distress and failure will follow if you are unable to obtain a college degree. Students are now groomed from a young age to maintain an impressive GPA while juggling extracurricular activities in order to compete with the college admissions process. The high school experience has become little more than a resume for college. Why is our generation subject to more academic stress than others? And where do these pressures come from?
So I have so much to talk to you about, but one question I wanted to ask you is, where do you think, Vicki, this pressure is coming from? Is it coming from parents? Is it coming from teachers? Is it coming from college admissions people? Is it coming from the students themselves? Is it coming from just being in a highly charged competitive environment?
Used to be you could get a good blue-collar job and make a very solid middle-class living without a college degree, with just a high school diploma. Those jobs are gone, and we are becoming more and more a service sector, which are the lower-paying jobs, and an executive sector, the higher-paying jobs, economy. I certainly think, though, that if you are entering into professional life, the expectation is that you have a college degree, and if you don't, you may get an entry-level job. There are all kinds of technical fields that allow you that entry-level job, but oftentimes you'll be stymied in the ability to move up the ladder and to have future opportunities to take on any kind of a management role, any kind of a more creative role, if you don't have that college degree.
Because really, you shouldn't have to go to college to have a job or to have something to sustain life. You shouldn't have to go to college to work at Enterprise Rent a Car or one of these places that are requiring degrees now, but we live in a flat world. We are now competing not just with people in California or San Diego or the United States, but we're competing with an entire global economy.
All these kids are working so hard to get in top-notch schools.
Right.
And then when they do, so many of them have to be remediated. In other words, they've taken all these AP classes, right. They've done incredibly well in school, they've done great on their standardized tests, or certainly well, and yet they get to college and they haven't retained anything. What is that telling you about the way we're teaching our kids?
Right. So, I mean, we have a quantity-driven model, I think, because we're so fearful as a society as to what the future holds for our kids and whether they'll be able to compete in the global economy, that our approach has been to do more of what we've always done. And what we're seeing is young people who are memorizing for a test, regurgitating, and then moving on to the next thing.
And then it evaporates in about 2 weeks, right?
Well,
in fact, one of the students said that.
So the principle behind the No Child Left Behind Act is to set high standards, believe every child can learn, and measure to see if we're getting results. And Congress need not weaken such a good piece of legislation.
The outcome of No Child Left Behind was already criticized by many educators even before it took effect. Because anybody who was really into education knew what was exactly going to happen. And that was actually the No Child Left Behind was a policy that actually demonized not what we call bad students, but what it really did was demonize poorer school districts.
No Child Left Behind was a piece of legislation that essentially required states to set standards and then test students in those standards and report the test data on students.
It emphasized more on standardized testing and results of standardized tests as opposed to project-based or assessment-based education.
It's set a ground of competition that, while perhaps inspired some and maybe made some improvements in certain areas, what it didn't do is fix the fundamental flaw in our public schools, is that we weren't inspiring passion, critical thinkers, and real-time learners.
The impact I think it had on the college admissions process is that it reinforced the use of standardized testing in the admissions process, which is SAT, ACT, SAT subject tests. So it kind of fueled that fire a little bit more.
I said back then, the goals of No Child Left Behind were the right ones. Standards and accountability, those are the right goals. Closing the achievement gap, that's a good goal. That's the right goal. We've got to stay focused on those goals, but we've got to do it in a way that doesn't force teachers to teach to the test or encourage schools to lower their standards to avoid being labeled as failures. That doesn't help anybody. Certainly doesn't help our children in the classroom.
What is education? Is it learning or the acquisition of grades? Is it my choice or your requirement? Is it about me or is it about you?
I've never ever met anyone who has had a dysfunctional relationship with learning. Never. But I know tons and tons and tons of people, students, who've had dysfunctional relationship with schooling. So that should tell us that there is a big chasm, a big break between education, learning, and schooling.
I think it's the more options and alternatives that our students have in our communities, the better. So obviously traditional schooling and AP curriculum are out there, and the larger percent of students are attending and going to those schools. But high schools like ours, public charters and school reform movements are just giving more opportunities and alternatives for students to demonstrate their talents and gifts in different ways.
You know, one of the things that's challenging with education is oftentimes educators have only done education. So we went to school, we had our own K-12 experience. Oftentimes people who go into education were successful in that structure, and so we replicate the structure. We often don't have people who are coming from industry or who've been in science or in the humanities who are coming back in and working in schools.
Come to the conclusion that what parents want is growth. Not just grades, but growth. They want to watch their little babies grow into humans that are socially responsible and critical thinkers. And we need to guide our public school system into creating schools that give us that growth.
We have to have a different understanding of education. It can no longer be tied to maybe future better jobs and investment and none of those things. Education should simply be what it was supposed to be, and that is to nurture, to cultivate the growth of a human being so that she or he will be able to serve another human being at its highest form. And that should be the basic understanding of education.
To me, defining success is reaching your full potential, right? I mean, that's my definition of success. Personal success, doing your personal best, achieving your personal best. And what that means for every student is different. Numbers will support the fact that I think, success or somebody reaching their potential best requires additional training beyond high school. My goal is to help students find and carve out the path that's best for them. And my hope is that they've done enough reflection to understand what that path is through their high school years. And my fear, though, is that some of those students that are choosing not to go to college, I don't think they're not always the ones that have put the most thought into it.
The way I see it is, if in fact universities are an institution that is supposed to educate our youngsters, then universities actually should accept people in the reverse order than what is happening today. So who needs education the most? Well, yes, maybe people getting A's and B's too, but the people who really need education the most are the people who are getting D's and F's. Universities should be accepting students who are struggling the most in junior high and high schools, and not just selecting what we consider cream of the crop. There should only be one criteria and one criteria only for entrance to any institution of higher education. And that criteria should be nothing more than whether or not an individual is willing to be educated. As an institution that is supposed to guarantee education opportunities to our citizens, it is so absurd that so many of our institutions are closing the door and actually pushing away thousands and thousands and thousands of students who are begging to be included in the institution of education. So for me, I'll kind of end this by suggesting that if you are not serving the betterment of another human being or humanity, then what is education for? That's it for today. Okay.
Thank you so much. After experiencing this journey and answering our original questions about why our generation is stressed out about education, I am left with a new question. How has this experience changed me as an individual? How has my personal relationship with education changed, and how has my future path been altered as a result? I can't say I know the answers to these new questions, but I know now that I will not mix my education with the governing perceptions of success in our society.
I ain't one to complain, but there's things in the game.
What's your name?
Consequence, I'm tight, burnt like flames.
And why's that?
American dream, they got this ghetto kid in the fiend.
Don't stress that, cause it's not in your bloodstream. Your whole being comes from greatness to remember. Chase Long got you caught in the storms of December, and brothers on the block packing nines like September. Change the situation, get these pockets all slender.
Yo, I be on the avenue where they be acting brand new. I'm splurging on these Reebok joints for shorty boo.
All of a sudden, I saw these two kids frontin', talking out their joints, but they wasn't saying nothing.